What's up in War Eagle, everybody? We are back right here inside the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report, live from SEC Media Days 2025. I have the pleasure of sitting down with John McDaid. He is the head man with the officiating folks here with the SEC. Mr. McDaid, how are we feeling today?
Doing great. How's Atlanta treating you this week?
Traffic is always terrible, so that's not something I enjoy.
Your here was pretty good.
No.
No, it wasn't.
It was not.
Sorry to hear that.
Plenty of traffic trying to get into town as well. Coming in from Alabama, so they had 2 lanes shut down on the highway, plus a bunch of Beehive folks coming in for that Beyonce concert. So yeah, it was awful. But I'm actually taking MARTA around town though, so I'm not dealing with the traffic within the city. But you had an opportunity to address everybody here, as you do every year, in regard to some of the things that are coming up. And one of the things I found interesting is you talked a lot about the pace of play and the length of games. How much do people kind of attribute those things to officiating?
Well, certainly from the standpoint of the last 10, 15 years, anytime we've tried to address the length of game, all of those years in terms of number of hours, minutes it takes to conclude the game, but recently also having a focus on the number of plays in a game, we've tried to tweak the playing rules to address it. And anytime you're expecting playing rules to take care of it, that means you're looking for officiating to take care of it, right? And some of them aren't, strictly speaking, playing rules. Some of them are just the mechanics that we use, how we administer a game, how we're being timely, getting from step 2 to step 3, in between downs or whatever the case may be. And the point I was trying to make this morning is, I think we need to ask ourselves, I think we've wrung out all of the ability we've had to quicken a game up through just timing rules and what we're asking our officials. What's left is how the game is played and how the game is called from the sideline. Only if a playing rule addresses or makes or institutes a change in how it's played and how it's called from the sideline are we going to get any more change in the overall game length. That's the point I was trying to make.
Gotcha. So last year, speaking of just kind of timing in games, new rule, the 2-minute timeout that was implemented. How do you feel like the administration of that went and the use of it within the game by the coaches? Like, how do you feel in year one, kind of looking back and how that impacted games?
For the terms of game length, whether it's in wall time or number of plays, literally no effect, which was what we were expecting, right? Because all we're doing with the 2-minute timeout was asking our media partners to save 1 media timeout for 2 minutes, right? So from an officiating standpoint, fairly seamless. Really didn't have any issues with it. What you need to do is find out from the coaches how did they like it, right? Because if you're on offense, you predominantly like the 2-minute timeout. Gives you an extra timeout during crunch time at the end of the half. Unless perhaps you're a tempo offense and you were looking to snap the ball quickly and couldn't get it off for the 2 minutes and you give your opponent a time to rest. The defensive coach typically you welcome it because, again, you get a break, be able to coach up your players in between plays during a possession that you normally wouldn't have a chance otherwise. But there are circumstances where maybe you're ahead and you want the clock to continue running, right? So officiating, administering the game, it went pretty seamless.
So that's a question that I have, though, in regard to, you said the coaches are probably the ones that have to be able to answer that question. How much feedback or communication are you having with coaches, athletic directors about some of the rules that are being put in place? Are a lot of the decisions that you're making about those changes with rules, are they coming from feedback from coaches? Like, how do you guys get to a place to say, okay, this is what the next thing is going to be?
If we have a rule change and we have coaches that are not fans of it, I don't need to wait long to get that feedback to myself. It's going to come to me, right? But there are multiple opportunities for me to gauge, where things are. Just even if they're not specifically talking about a rule, I can tell by the comments that are coming in, perhaps the challenges they're having with interpreting the rule so that they can coach technique and coach players to not commit a foul. I can tell when it's easier at times than others. I also have times I meet with every team out of season in person, whether it's during spring ball in March or April, or it's during August camps. And we have opportunities to not only talk to head coaches, but talk to positional coaches, right? Always love the defensive secondary coaches coming up to me and want to talk about defensive pass interference rules, right? And there's enough two-way conversation that I can get a good feel what's going on. Sometimes they don't like a rule, but they understand it's needed, or they understand that whether they like it or not, it's coming because it's for the good of the game.
What you're doing, is that coming via teaching tape though, when you guys have a new rule that you need to implement? Like you've got a couple of rules right now about, timeouts for injury substitutions, or substitutions in the pace at which people who are trying to substitute when an offense changes. Is most of that coming via teaching tape that you're sending to them?
Yeah. Something I adopted a few seasons ago is I look for opportunities basically this time of the year to create what we call voiceover tapes that go to the coaches and the officials at the same time. So they're both hearing the same message. Just last week, I created 4 of those and sent them out to our teams. And I'll use them next week during our preseason clinic in Birmingham with our officials. 2 of the things that I sent out last week have to do with defensive movement prior to the snap and how the rules have been changed this year to address that. And substitution mechanics, the pace at which defensive matchup substitutions happen. I put a voiceover together on both of those that address that. And coaching staffs are just coming back into the building now because they're all on their own family vacations, right? And I'll probably get questions over let's say the next 2 to 3 weeks about those things for clarifications or whatnot. And it's not beyond the realm of possibility that I'll move to push yet another voiceover out just to provide that clarification. All teams, both coaches and officials, are hearing the message at the same time.
Gotcha. Now, you talked a little bit about the substitution situation. Now, we're an Auburn channel, so Coach Hugh Freeze, one of the kind of on the forefront of hurry up, no huddle, pace. He hasn't been that guy recently, but I think with some of the changes, do you anticipate more teams maybe getting back into that pace? And how does that impact what you all are doing from an officiating standpoint? If I understood correctly, you said if you deem it not be an athletic pace, I think is how you phrased it, center judge just moving out of the way, let the play continue. How do you think that's going to impact kind of some of the game and the officiating?
First, I'll say this. We've had substitution mechanics that we've been using now for about 10 years, basically since the introduction of the center judge, the 8th official on the field. And they're pretty tried and tested, right? They work really well. The wrinkle that we're trying to address this year with a point of emphasis is when we do have a defensive matchup substitution, that they do it in a timely fashion, right? So the defense isn't trying to illegally get the play clock at least below 15 when the player comms shut off. If not, get it all the way to 0 to force the offense either take a charge timeout or incur a delay of game penalty. That's that one facet that we're trying to address. As far as whether I see teams adopting more tempo than we saw in 2024 or less tempo, I really don't know. That's an evolutionary part of the game that it seems to surprise me more than I can predict what's going to happen. You said something earlier. A lot of it has to do with what kind of personnel do you have? What kind of comfort level are you putting the throttle to the floor? I can't answer that. I would need the season to start and see some data points before I could make that determination.
So let me ask you a question about a rule that is more recent, right? The disconcerting signals rule that's been put into place. How difficult is something like that to officiate, the difference between I'm trying to get someone else on my team's attention versus I'm actually trying to make something to encourage offensive players to move pre-snap?
It's very difficult. But not only trying to make the determination between the two, but actually hearing signals inside our stadiums that are unbelievably loud, right? It's a terrific challenge. One of the things we did in the playing rules this year is we reserved signals for each side of the ball. We have had defenses using either move or shift or stem as their verbal cadence to get their coordinated move on the defensive side of the ball. And the offenses are trying to incorporate those words into their cadence, saying they can't use that because we're using it. It kind of nasty, right? So we've now designated in the rule book designated signals on either side of the ball. But even with that, sometimes like on video, without any audio, I can tell you who's signaling because there's a little jerk in their body, so on and so forth. And sometimes that's all you're going to be able to see or hear, because you're not going to hear because of what's going on with the crowds. But disconcerting signals, it's okay for the defense to communicate to each other, including coordinating some movement, but you can't use it to confuse your opponent.
Another one, not necessarily new, but one that I think a lot of fans find inconsistent in the interpretation from the officials is about targeting, right? What's been kind of the process and the evolution of teaching officials how to navigate targeting situations and what rises to the level of what should be targeting offenses to get them kicked out?
You know, this may surprise you. I think we're doing pretty darn well in our performance of evaluating targeting, right? Where I think we collectively are not doing a good job is we have a rule that's been around now for more than a decade, and the misunderstanding of it is so it's incomprehensible how much we misunderstand it inside the college football ecosystem. We're not doing a good job of describing it. I covered this in one of my discussions earlier this morning. One of the two, there's two varieties of targeting. One of them is what we used to call spearing. And the Southeastern Conference believes that if we went back to just calling that spearing, it would be more self-evident what the rule is than it is today, right? So what am I trying to say bottom line? I think our performance in judging targeting is pretty good. I'm not going to get a lot of universal agreement with that. But where there's disagreement, it starts with a misunderstanding of what's being asked for the officials. And one of the things that I'll say that a lot of times will cause people to pause is targeting is not trying to get all helmet-to-helmet contact out of the game. It's only trying to get specific contact out of a game.
Okay. All right. Last question I have for you here, and this is just from a standpoint of a guy who I'm sure has to deal with a lot of this. How often, ballpark, after a Saturday of college football, are you guys getting stuff that next week from coaches that says, "Hey, can you guys take a look at this?" Like, how many situations are you guys having to deal with that on a consistent?
It's routine. I'll say that. And let's understand, when I get plays from a school, certainly there's a variety. They don't agree with the call that we made, right? Whether it's we put a flag on the field and they don't believe it's a foul, or we didn't put a flag on the field and they believe that it is, right? Certainly we get that week in and week out. But there are other reasons they're sending me plays. Sometimes they understand why it's a foul, but they want to really specifically understand so they can go back and teach technique better or differently to the players. Sometimes something will happen in a game and they just don't understand the rule. If special teams or something to do with timing rules at the end of the half, right? And so they'll send a play in with a question just so they better understand what the rule is. It's not always confrontational in that we believe you screwed up. Certainly there's plenty of those, but there's other things as well.
So I know I said last question, but it just made me think of something else. Basketball is actually going, in college basketball, into a challenge rule now for the collegiate basketball coaches. Is that something that you feel like may be on the horizon for collegiate football? And would you be interested in seeing that being a part of the game?
The caretakers of the game, which is another way, I guess, for saying the rules committee, they've looked hard at this for the last 3 or 4 off seasons, right? We'll continue to look at it. I'm not making any predictions if and when we're going to have more of a challenge system than we have today. I think it's something compelling that we need to seriously consider. Basketball's doing it obviously because of how much the flow has been impacted, and in the last 2 minutes of a game, or in particular, right? We don't necessarily have that kind of flow issue in football, so there's not that compelling reason to go to a more of a challenge system. But there are other compelling reasons, at least in John McDaid's mind, of doing it. It's a continual dialogue. That's where we are.
Okay, awesome. Well, listen.
Continuing dialogue.
I understand. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking some time to talk with me and inform our fans about the changes coming up in the rules.
Enjoyed it. Enjoy yourself in Orlando.
Absolutely. We'll try to do our best. Well, that's it. We're here live at SEC Media Days. Once again, John McDaid here, breaking down the new rules here for collegiate football. If you like this content, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. We are right here with the War Report, and appreciate the folks over at the Rogue Shop. RogueShop.com is where you can go, America's #1 online dispensary. Use code REPORT, 15% off over there. We're out of here. Until the next time, and as always, War Eagle.